Today is April 9th, 2021. My name is Yvette Gill. I'm interviewing Jazmin Molina for the University Library Special Collections and Archives at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, hereafter abbreviated as UTRGV. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Ms. Molina, that this interview will be placed in the University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV and shared with Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there is anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there is something you want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. The University Library Special Collections and Archives will archive your interview along with any other photographs and other documentation you are willing to share. UTRGV University Library will retain copyright and non-exclusive right to the interview and any other materials you donate to Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting to make sure you agree with our interview procedures before we continue. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each question. Do you give University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV consent to archive your interview and your materials at the UTRGV University Library?
Yes, I agree.
Do you grant UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives right, title, and interest in copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes, I agree.
Do you agree to allow UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes, I agree.
Do you grant the University Library Special Collections and Archives consent to share your Zoom interview with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voices of a Pandemic Oral History mini project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Yes, I agree.
As you recall, we previously filled out a pre-interview form. We use information from the pre-interview form to help in research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas at Austin before Voces sends it to UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives. We would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members so that will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at UTRGV University Library. The final 2 questions ask for your consent on what I just described. Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file to researchers at UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives?
Yes, I agree.
On occasion, UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and Voces receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or your email with journalists?
Yes, I agree.
Thank you so much for your consent. Your experiences and stories mean a lot to us at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives. I look forward to what you say in the interview questions I will now ask. Thank you so much for being a part of this, Ms. Molina. And before we do begin with these questions, can you please tell us a little bit about you?
Yes, my name is Jazmin Molina. I am a 4th grade reading teacher at IDEA Riverview. I'm 27 years old and I love to exercise, spend time with my family, and that's it.
And you teach where?
I teach here at Brownsville, Texas at the IDEA Riverview by close to the border.
Okay, awesome, that's great. Okay, so now we will go ahead and continue with the interview with the first question. So the first question I do want to ask you is, when did you hear about COVID-19 and how did you learn about it?
I heard about it last year during, it was mostly from a coworker, very lightly about what was happening in Europe. just some virus. And then towards March, I heard that it was now here up north in the United States. And then during spring break, that's when the day right before we were going off of spring break vacation, I was getting a lot of messages from my other coworker, well, from my peers in other campuses that if we were canceling classes. And I was confused because I didn't know why. And so that day was pretty much like a bombshell. Like at the end of school, admin went ahead and told us just take everything home that you might be able to teach online somehow. And that's how pretty much we knew that, you know what, this is serious. Now it's here.
And what was your first reaction to the information about COVID-19?
It was more of a shock. At first, I thought it was, I don't know, I couldn't believe it. It sounded like a movie. And then once I knew, you know, numbers were increasing, and because we even had to go to lockdown, then I knew this was serious.
Okay. And at what point did you realize this pandemic was a serious life-alerting event?
It was as soon as our county, Cameron County, went into lockdown, and we even had a curfew. And if we were even on the street, we might get pulled over, and that's like, why were we leaving our home? So I thought that was really crazy how it got to that point.
Yes. So over the last few months, what news media or social media, or what type of sources did you rely on to keep you informed about COVID-19?
I use a lot of the Apple News on my phone, as well as the local KRG news, such as Channel 5 News, Channel 4 News, and I guess the CBC News.
Okay. And can you share with me what you understand about COVID-19 as an infectious disease? Can you share with us what you don't understand about the new virus?
Well, as far as I know, it's this very contagious virus that it's affected people in different ways, some more serious and deadly than others. And it's crazy how some people did not get it when they were exposed to those that did have COVID. As far as I know, that it attacks the you know, your lungs, your respiratory system, and the new strands. I mean, I don't know about them, but that's far as I know, as it affects the respiratory system, and everyone is different.
Yes. Can you tell me what you know about the vaccines available to the public?
Well, I know that at first it was pretty much by who was by groups, who were they targeting first in getting the vaccines. And pretty much now everyone is able to get it, and it's going by groups. So that's good that, you know, it's available to those that do want the vaccine, and it hasn't been mandatory yet.
And how do you feel about these vaccines?
I personally have never gotten the flu vaccine. So when I hear about the COVID vaccine, and I'm a teacher, so it's available to me, but I don't feel comfortable in taking the vaccine, because I just, one, I didn't get COVID. Two, my husband had COVID, and I was around him, and I never tested positive. So I feel like I don't want to get the COVID vaccine. You know, I feel like I guess my immune system has been good in that sense.
That's really good to hear. Now, do your family members hold the same beliefs as you about COVID-19, or are there some members who take it more seriously or some that may take it more lightly?
I think at first it was because it was on you. We Hispanics are very kind of like laughing about things, and we're more of a, we won't take it seriously until unfortunately it does get personal. And so I feel that our family pretty much took it seriously after it started affecting our families. So now we do take it seriously, and now we don't say any jokes about it or anything, because it has affected our family, and to the point where we've lost already family members because of it.
So I do want to learn more about your thoughts based on traveling. So my next set of questions will be based on traveling during the pandemic. Okay. Did you do any traveling during the pandemic? And if so, did you fear you would get COVID, or did you fear that you would bring the virus back home?
My husband and I did take a vacation to Las Vegas in December of 2020, and we were, my husband had actually gotten COVID in November. And so after he tested negative and I was on vacation, we decided, yeah, like, let's go. And honestly, we didn't feel scared. And I think it was because we were already exposed to it. And my husband, thank God, he did, nothing bad happened. And so we felt safe in traveling with following all the guidelines.
And did you feel the need to self-quarantine after you arrived?
Yes. I feel after we got home, I didn't want to be near family members, older relatives, because maybe I was testing negative, but I might be carrying it with me, and I just didn't want to risk it. So we did quarantine ourselves when we came back.
Do you feel, since you traveled to Las Vegas, do you feel the state of Nevada was following the same guidelines as Brownsville, Texas?
Yes. When we were at when we were gambling, they had those dividers. They weren't allowing more than several amount of people to be there, and they were still following the 6 feet apart. A lot of games weren't available, kind of like the ones where multiple people can just go and sit. Like, those weren't available to the people to use.
Okay. You did mention how Cameron County, and we live this, that they did have curfews. So how do you feel about the curfews that Cameron County had?
I thought it was good. Even I thought it was good because the whole point was for everyone to quarantine, and there was no business in anyone being out and about, because everything was closed. I think what made it hard was the family visits, and how are we going to explain that, oh, well, I just want to go see my parents, I just want, and so I think that made it very hard. And a lot of people, including my husband and I, were, what, let's just go real quick and then we just come back. And especially because we live like 5 minutes away. So yes, I agree with the guidelines they gave us, and curfews and lockdown, but I was also one of those who like, I wanted to visit family too.
Right. And did Las Vegas, Nevada have curfews when you traveled?
No, no, they did not have a curfew. But we just after a while decided, just to go back to the room, and that was it.
Okay. Do you think the curfew helped minimize the COVID-19 cases?
I think yes, but I feel that it started picking up here in Cameron County after we kind of let our guard down. Um, there weren't a lot of cases in March and April when we had gone into lockdown. And so when the cases started picking up, we're more in the summer, but then lockdown was over. And that's where, we were a hot spot. It was crazy how the numbers just spiked up.
And as you were traveling over to Las Vegas, was there anything different that you noticed in the airports, from before you traveled to like now?
I did see there was, how there's those stairs that kind of you walk on and then they continue moving you, so you're kind of going at a faster speed. Those were not available. There was also like vending machines; those were turned off. The seats, the only thing that did kind of was a little off. The seats, it was open to everybody. It was a full plane. So that was something that I was like, wait, you guys aren't following the 6 feet apart here. But that was the only thing that was kind of different. But other than that, mostly everyone just following the typical guidelines, 6 feet apart, the mask.
Okay. So for the next set of questions, I would love to talk about your position as a teacher, because I know that it has had a huge impact on your part of your everyday life. I know the teaching has changed completely from being on campus to now maybe virtual, and so I'm sure that has had a huge impact on you.
Mm-hmm.
So just to get a little backstory. How long have you been employed with IDEA?
I have been employed with IDEA. This will be my 4th year. I started off as a co-teacher, and then for the last 3 years, I've been the reading 4th grade teacher.
Okay. So you did mention that you are a 4th grade teacher and you are a reading teacher. What are some activities that you like to teach to your students?
Virtual or like just when things were normal? Or
you can tell us both.
Okay. Well, during the school year, I really liked when we would do kind of like our Fun Friday activities, and it was more like scavenger hunt, reading games, board games dealing with reading. They really enjoyed that, and it was all hands-on activities. And there was like about 32 students in one class, and we were all sharing things. It's crazy how that used to be normal, and then now that it's virtual, teachers all across have been working together. Hey, what activities are you doing? Hey, this teacher did this. Okay, let's have a virtual field trip. And that was something, oh yeah, let's go to the zoo. And the cool thing about it was a lot of like the New York Zoo did a virtual field trip. Like they had something for us teachers to just browse on their websites. So that was cool. There was a lot of games that I had no idea existed before, and the kids love it. And I thought that was something really cool. Even through this pandemic, we got to see different ways of teaching students in a fun way, besides just the board games, the typical we are used to.
That's great, because it sounds like you are able to explore new things, learn new things as well. What are other roles aside from teaching do you volunteer to hold?
That what?
What are other roles aside from teaching that you volunteer in?
Well, besides teaching, Is this like my hobbies, like things that I do out of school?
Well, things that you do aside from teaching, like maybe do you do after school,
Mm.
to pull
Well,
to
yes, we so because I'm a testing grade level, usually we always start tutorials during the second semester in January. But last year we decided tutorials in September. And so that started rolling out. Then we also did Saturday Academy. So, again, because it was crunch time, and it was so relieving for last year's STAR test to just be kind of forgiven and not played into, because it would have been, we were working so hard, and it was a relief that it was going to be taken away. But this year the STAR is in, it's going to be available for those that want, for those that want to bring their kids to campus. And we started tutorials too, because the ratings, and we're competing against schools. And so it's come to the point where right now it's been exhausting, because doing tutorials 2 days out of the week, then still planning for the ones in person, and then planning for the ones virtual, and making accommodations to fit every student so that they still get the same material. That's where it's been such a struggle, like having to plan out all these 3 different ways to fit all our students.
Yes. So, can you tell us how teaching has changed now that, you're telling us about tutorials, you're telling us about the new ways of teaching? How do you feel this has changed? How can you tell us?
I feel last year our students kind of, we didn't finish in a good way, and I felt like there was no goodbye. And so it was kind of like, we didn't have that, we didn't get to say goodbye. And so this year's students, it's very hard getting to know them, because some don't come off of mute, some don't turn on their camera. I have no idea how some of my students looked, no idea how they might have spoken. And so there couldn't be a connection with some, and that would make me feel bad, because as a teacher, you want to be able to connect with all your students, and I couldn't control that. And I feel also that because we were going through COVID, we all had like a soft spot. It was very like, oh, my kids, yes, let's do it together. And there was no independent practice for them. And so now when we're trying to get them to start, when we're trying to get them to do their work, they can't apply it to the paper. They have no idea. They've never seen a star. They have no idea how to bubble in. And it's crazy to see that. Like, we have to teach them from something, from the very beginning. And I feel that they might have also been very antisocial, that they don't have the peers to communicate with. And it's all through the computer. And when they came in person, some were like, Miss Molina, this feels like the first day of school, even though we were in April. So that was crazy.
Yes, that definitely changed students. So you did mention that in spring break of last year, that's when the classes completely stopped. Everything turned virtual. Now, how do you feel that the school handled that?
It was crazy. That, like, we had spring break, and the following week teachers were going through a whole bunch of meetings, a whole bunch of trying to get us to learn these tools and how to teach, like, through Teams. And that's the application we were using, and how to create a meeting, how to create groups, and every day we were learning something new. And I remember that Friday, pretty much we had to have everything ready. And I just remember feeling overwhelmed. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this Monday, because Monday students were going to come back, and we had to make sure that we knew how to operate teams and, be ready for them for instruction. So it was very overwhelming that whole week.
And when did they ask the teachers to return to campus?
They asked us to return, I want to say in September of 2020. And it was very crazy, because I think IDEA was one of the ones who started first in our county. We teachers went back first compared to BISD or Jubilee or other ones. And so we were kind of like, okay, let's see how it works. And everybody was so iffy about it, because then after that, students, we were gonna ask students to start coming in, and they were gonna be in our classes. And it was a little weird. Some teachers did not want anything to do with the students, like near them. So it was a little crazy to see that, how we were going to handle passing out lunch, passing out breakfast, learning everything in person, how to sanitize. And yeah, it was kind of like learning how to be a cleaner, a sanitizer,
Yes.
taking other roles.
So were the students virtual at this time, or were they on campus?
So that's where it was also double crazy, because we did have some kids that were in person, and we had the ones virtual. And so when math was going on, we had to make sure that, are the kids coming in? Can they see can we see Miss Molina's screen? Miss Molina, I'm having trouble getting in. So I remember when math was going on, I was the co-teacher for her. I was trying to help her out, who needed to come into class, calling parents, your child's not in class, please come in. And she's teaching to both. So she had her own class with her own group of students, teaching virtual, and she had to manage answering questions, the ones here on the screen, and then still answering questions, the ones, in person. And so she was just going back and forth, and it was so overwhelming. And we tried our best to help each other out, and so that was good that they paired us up with our team so that we can, help relieve some of the overwhelming.
Yes. And how did the campus prepare the teachers to do online teaching?
We had to go to several trainings there at campus. And during that week, I remember we had to leave lessons recorded for students, because we were going to be there the whole day. They went over pretty much everything, like breakfast, dismissal, sanitizing, attendance. And we had a PD about everything you can think of, just to prepare us for having, the students come in person.
Okay. Were there any programs being added to your lessons?
We kept the same. Teaching style. The only thing that changed was because we needed to provide still tests. We wanted to make sure that they were understanding our lessons. And so one of the things that we came up with, or actually we learned about in teams, having assignments. So that was one way for us to track our students, if they were understanding, checking for their understanding.
And were the students provided with electronics?
Yes. Our campus I think they did a really good job in providing all the students laptop chargers, and those that did not have Wi-Fi, we provided little mobile hotspots on the go for them. And I know Spectrum did this really good program where if you had a child who was attending school and there was no Wi-Fi, they were gonna do some sort of deal. And I never had Wi-Fi in my house because I just thought I don't need it. But once we went virtual, oh my gosh, it was like, you know what, I need to be part of that program too. And that's how I got in with the Spectrum as well, because as an educator, right? So it was cool to see everyone helping out.
Can you share with us how you prepared for virtual learning?
Yes. So I applied kind of like what I do in my class, like, something interesting that's going to get their attention. And I try to do that also with virtual, whether it was, like a brain pop video. They really enjoy those, something relating to my lesson, maybe an article. And from there, we would always do kind of like a do now, just to get the brain starting, like alertness. Or I try to keep our lessons material something that they would enjoy, and a lot of participation, mostly because they had siblings next to them, they had dogs, and they were always wanting to share, oh, Miss Molina, I have a dog, like, here, look. So I would say that I did leave that space for them to share, especially because not everyone would want to participate. And when something did come up that they felt they could be a part of, I was like, yes, please take the mic. I want to hear from you.
That's good. How did the campus handle COVID-19 cases at school?
At first, they would send out, first, if a student felt sick, we would call in the nurse, and then they would take them out, run their temperature check. And then if they didn't come back, then we knew something was off. We wouldn't find out right in that moment what was going on. They left. Then towards the end of school, there would be an email sent out saying somebody tested positive. But it would take a while if that was a teacher's classroom, they wouldn't know until the end of the day, and then that classroom would quarantine, and then they would come back. All the class would be able to come back after 2 weeks. But at the beginning, I felt our campus was very on it, but then, I don't know, there was a lot of little things that I didn't like, that they were doing, because if teachers were out, a lot of teachers started being out because they were exposed to it. So someone new was coming into the class, and so instead of us keeping the same group, teachers started switching around and covering, and we're all mixing around. And I felt like that's what might have kept spiking our campus cases. And it got to the point where during testing, when we allowed students to come in to take their semester exams, they didn't offer it in the cafeteria. And so we're like, oh, let's just move them in a group, like in a classroom. And that classroom was already belonging to another grade level. And so there was a lot of mix and matching. And, that wasn't something that was supposed to be done. That was something we needed to keep cautious. But in that moment, it was more like, well, we just need to do it right now,
Yes. How are you and your students holding up with the virtual learning during this pandemic?
Well, right now we are pushing for students to come in person because of the STAR test, and more kids are coming in, but I mean, we still have those that are virtual. Some parents are like, no, like I'm only gonna allow them to go in during that STAR test date. And we're like, okay, that's fine. Like we understand. But my students, I've heard some of them, when they don't come to school and they do their classes online, they're like, Miss Molina, no, I didn't know. I didn't get to log in. Like I got distracted. I was doing this and that. We've heard in the background where parents are like, go do this real quick. And they're in class, And so they have personally said, no, Miss Molina, I really like it here. Like I want to be here in school. So that's good to hear in a way.
Yes. Are you concerned about the effectiveness of remote learning for educating your students?
Yes, like 100%. They're as much as we try to teach them using Pear Deck, which is like we can see in real time their work, so when we've been working on that all year, and then the same passage, the same type of format that we're using passages, when they came in to take the test, they couldn't apply what they were doing online. They were blank. They had no idea what to do. They couldn't make that connection, trying what they were already doing online to their test. So I would want things to go back to teaching. There's nothing like us actually checking their work right there on the spot. If most of my class isn't understanding the lesson, like I need to stop and reteach again, like in a different way. But if they're virtual, I have no idea. I don't know if they're nodding yes with me or giving me confused faces. I can't tell. So I just assume, okay, let's continue. Let's keep going.
Okay. Have you taken on any extra work duties because of COVID-19?
Yes. Well, so going back to STAR, now that we're doing STAR, we have to roll out a plan because, our campus rating, we're shooting for an A, and that means that our scores have to be at a certain level. And now we have so many people helping third, fourth, and fifth. And I love that they're helping us out, but that means that the content teacher has to provide exemplars material for all those extra teachers that are going to help us out, because they don't know, right? And so I am having to come up with 4 other different teachers, how they're gonna help my students, providing exemplars, and then still having to explain to them, this is how you do it. And that's not even including tutorials. I still have to come up with something else for tutorials. So now, before, when I wouldn't stay after school because there was no need, everything was virtual. But now that it's virtual and tutorial and in person and 4 other different teachers helping out, it's been overwhelming. It's a lot of extra work now.
Do you know of any employee or support staff member who has received maybe like a pay cut or lost a job or has been furloughed?
No, like I haven't met someone who's lost their job, but I know that for us teachers, we were receiving like a stipend because we were doing virtual and they knew that it was requiring more work. But that was for every teacher. We received a stipend.
Okay. So you did mention in the pre-interview how your family experienced loss due to the virus. So for the next set of questions, I will ask you what your views are on after your loss due to the virus. So after experiencing family loss, did your views on the virus change?
Yes, for sure. Like, at the beginning, it was more like, oh yeah, let's take precaution. But once it hit home, it was very like, oh my goodness, like this is real, that we need to be serious about it. And so then our perspective changed on the virus. Everyone was, start following the guidelines and make sure you're not near other family members that you haven't seen in a while.
How did your family cope after the traumatic experience?
Eva, can I run to the restroom really quick?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How did your family cope after the traumatic experience?
Well, how it happened was my side. My grandparents first, it hit my grandma first. She was feeling under the weather, and to the point where she had to go to the hospital. She went in. Within a day or two, my grandpa went in, and then my dad was feeling also some type of symptoms. His brother, my uncle Joel, as well. And so all four of them are in the hospital. And I mean, I remember FaceTiming my dad, and he couldn't talk. Like, there was this ventilator, over him, and I remember him saying, like, I can't talk. I'm super out of breath. I feel very tired. And my grandparents were unconscious. I think they had the defibrillator or something like that. And so when my grandma, my grandpa, we started getting news that they were feeling a little bit better, and so we're like, oh, thank goodness, like, they might make it. But then, next thing we know is that no, that they didn't make it. And it was at first very confusing, because we had gotten, they had told us that they were fine, that they were actually responding, and from one day to another, it just that they passed away. And I started thinking at one point, is it because of their age? Is it because of the amount of defibrillators they have? Are they prioritizing, maybe a younger group? And so I feel in that sense that might have been a reason. I don't know, but as soon as they passed, my dad and my uncle were not allowed. Nobody was allowed to see them. Nobody was allowed to see them even when they were in there. So my dad, I mean, I don't know the last memory he has of them. Like, it wasn't after they passed away that then they let them visit them and like say their goodbyes. But it was very hard for his siblings, my dad, because they didn't have that connection to say goodbye or something like that. But I feel for my dad in that sense, that he didn't get to say his goodbyes.
So you mentioned how your dad also at the same time had COVID. Was he allowed to see your grandparents while he had COVID, or how did it work? Were you able to see them, or?
No, nobody was able to see my dad or my uncle at the hospital. My dad and my uncle were not allowed to see my grandparents either when they were, unconscious. It wasn't until after they passed away that then they were allowed. But I think it was only my dad, actually. With my uncle, they didn't let him in more.
Did you take extra precaution after experiencing this loss when going out in public?
Yes. When that happened, when my dad came out of the hospital, I wanted to be close to him, and I wanted to be there for him, but I still had to take those precautions because he was still recovering from COVID. And I didn't want to track something and then bring it to my husband's side of the family. So it was very hard trying to, keep away from him, but then he's mourning, and, it was very hard trying to be there for him, because I want to be there for you, but I also need to take precaution, and I don't know what I might bring. And I felt like, my dad didn't have that that time to, grieve, with everyone else.
Yes. And you did mention that your husband tested positive for COVID-19. So how did you help him during this time?
So a lot of when we found out he tested positive, a lot of people were telling me you need to quarantine, like you can't be near him. But I know, I didn't want to do that because he needed me, and I needed to be there for him and take care of him. And so I was not gonna, if I got it, we were gonna get it together and we were gonna make it out of it together. But it was, but I that's how I was gonna be there for him. And so when he did test positive, how I helped him was we actually got these remedies that it was a lot dealing with garlic, and these remedies were coming from our grandparents, like his grandma, my grandma, and you need to do these recipes and he's gonna feel better. And so I was just constantly making teas, and a lot of vitamins, and still going outside and just getting directly from the sun as well. So that's how I helped him try to recover from it.
And how did that affect you, or did it affect your job in any way?
Yes. So I remember I remember my husband feeling really weird. He started off with a big headache, and then one night he wakes up and he has this abdominal pain and he can't stand it. And then he's nauseated, and Sunday he's still feeling under the weather. I'm like, you need to go to the doctor. This is weird. Monday is when he finally decides to go get tested. And I'm like, great, okay. But I didn't go with him, so I was still at work. But I did let my manager know, hey, my husband has his symptoms, especially because we always had to notify the campus if anybody that we were close to was experiencing any symptoms, or us. So I let my manager know, and she's like, no, well, you can still come in. I was like, okay. So I went into work. My husband tested positive. I was in my classroom with my students, and I automatically, told my manager, and she's like, okay, come down. I need you to go home. And so I was like, well, I guess they're going to quarantine my whole classroom. But no, my classroom still stayed open, and another teacher just went in and, was there taking over. And I thought that was really weird because you don't know if I was carrying it. You don't know, that's where I think that our campus kind of let their guard down, and our cases went up. That's where, because we weren't following everything to the T, because a lot of teachers were being out. So yeah, I had to teach from home. So I'm here trying to, take care of my husband, and then still trying to virtual teach. And yeah, it was good to be home, but still a little challenging.
Right. Now to close with our interview, I will ask some final questions. Are you satisfied with the local response to COVID-19 in Brownsville, Texas?
I think our county has, I guess, kind of let their guard down in a bit, just in the sense that when in the summer, things were opening up and they were allowing, yes, they were still following the guidelines, but I feel right now in this moment, our county just like, well, if you want to wear a mask, you can wear it. It's not mandatory. Bars were open up, and I was hearing from other friends of mine that, like, no one's wearing a mask in there. And I think that's one of the reasons why our county has still, remained kind of like a hot spot, and we're having a little more trouble trying to come up, and because we're not following the guidelines, and it's so easy not to because everyone else isn't doing it. So, but we're only human.
Right. Are you satisfied with the state response to COVID-19 led by the governor in Texas?
I guess somewhat, but just because he went ahead and during a couple of months he just took away the whole mask, and they keep reducing the guidelines to 3 feet now, and I feel like it's because they want the vaccine, right? Like they're all like, well, if everyone gets a vaccine, then we can go back to normal. But I feel like we should still keep waiting and see when everyone gets their vaccine. But I guess he's done somewhat of a, trying to keep everything in order.
And are you satisfied with the current national response to COVID-19 led by President Biden and his administration?
I honestly, I don't really keep up with how some of the guidelines are in other states, and I mean, as long as we're still trying to follow the CDC guidelines, then I guess he's been doing good with that.
If you had the power to respond to COVID-19 with policy, laws, or workplace decisions, what would you do differently, if anything?
I would say just holding, if something were to come back again like this, I would say for us to, hold on of that lockdown, like make us quarantine, make us full effect on how it was in March, not just that 1 or 2 months, but letting it play out like that for several. I felt like everything moved too quickly, and we were trying to like, oh, it's okay, it never happened here, and then we let our guard down in that area.
Okay. Are there any other stories or experiences you would like to share with me that I have not asked about?
No.
Okay. Ms. Molina, I really appreciate you taking the time for this interview. Thank you so much for participating in the UTRGV Voces Oral History Project, and I hope you continue to stay safe, and may you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Likewise.